Hi, welcome back this week to The Naked Doctor. I'm Dr. Tammy.
And I'm Chrissy.
We have a great show today. It's really interesting because every time I do a Facebook Live, I get so many views about this topic because people immediately tune in because they're like, oh, wow. You know, they kind of just catch something and they're like, is that me? And the topic of today is narcissism. And when you hear that word, you often think that bodybuilder in the mirror. And that is only one type of narcissist. That is somebody who is very grandiose. But the subtle ones, the more covert, not the overt, are the ones that are the most dangerous. And I think everybody can relate to this because everyone's had someone who's toxic in their reality. And we're going to talk about some of the ways that you are susceptible and how to be less susceptible. Solid journey. And then the word narcissist is so overused in our society. And so what I'd really like to do is kind of change your thinking to a toxic partner, because it is a dance between two people. And that doesn't make you not a victim or, you know, weak, but it is a dance. And there are things that make you very susceptible to that dance. So there are, when you do like a, you know, the DSM-5, which is a psychological diagnosis of pathology.
Like the real, people. Not just someone going, you're acting like a narcissist. Like when you do the real
and we all have
diagnosis.
We all have some narcissistic capabilities. It's very self-protective. Being in medicine, being a woman in medicine, I have to be a little bit, you know, I have to kind of puff up a little bit, and I have to sometimes kind of fight for my boundaries that way. And that's a healthy narcissism. We're talking the pathological. These people are extremely dangerous. And at the end of the show, we're going to give you a link to who you can call for their domestic hotlines that you can call. And so this is not about, you know, we're talking about in general just these toxic relationships and red flags for more serious things and maybe cautionary, you know, kind of talk here. But if you are in real danger, this can be really significant. And domestic violence takes many, many lives a year. And so it's not a, you know, it's not a light matter. And so, you know, if you're having trouble or you're scared, reach out, have a plan. One of the biggest things that toxic people can do to us is isolate us. We're going to talk about a little glossary of terms and how to recognize the situation. But when you're isolated, you're a sitting duck for drama that leads to trauma.
All of those bad things that nobody likes. Goodness, this feels like a heavy one, but we're going to do the best we can to keep it as light as we can, because we're good at that. We're good at that.
And, you know, it's easy to beat yourself up about it too. And a lot of times it comes from so many directions. Sometimes we're born into it. And sometimes it's a work area issue. I mean, especially in medicine, especially a woman in medicine, you know, it was like I faced it all the time. I did not play the victim card though. I mean, I just did my work. I just, you know, barreled through. And people ask me, was that ever a problem? Was there ever discrimination? And I'm sure there was, looking back. But I never looked at that.
I just made it a non-issue. That's one thing to do in a place, especially when you're like, I would think like with an internship where you're doing something for a period of time and you know you're going to move on. But if you're in a relationship with someone and you've made this agreement to be with them forever, that's part of beating yourself up. Like, how do you justify, I said I was going to do this forever. This isn't cool anymore. I'm making more compromises than I realized that I was going to have to make in this relationship. How do you begin to extricate yourself from that? It's not like a job where you just fill out another resume and go from there. This is something that you signed up for life. Oh no. Oh no.
Remember the show we did about weight loss, and we talked about its commitment, and all success is about commitment. There are these very confusing messages, especially as women, because commitment is, you know, especially when you have children involved, that commitment is very tough to get around. And so if you have a commitment to a toxic relationship, that is, it's a whole nother can of cats. You know, that's just, what do you even do with that?
Yeah. It's like continuing to eat something that you know is slightly poisonous. It's not going to kill me right now, but at some point this is not going to be good for me anymore. Only now it's the person that you're with. How do you make those, if you're making micro commitments to losing weight, how do you make micro commitments to getting out of a trap like that?
Yeah. And sometimes it's as easy as just learning new boundaries. That's really hard once you've had those boundaries breached, though. So when we come back, we're going to talk about a little glossary of terms that help me recognize some situations that I was in and how to know that you're in that situation. So stay tight. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. The world of hyperbaric medicine is absolutely amazing. It's been around for more than 60 years, but what it does is hyper means more than, and baric is pressure. So it creates a pressure environment where oxygen can actually get into the cells. I think it should be used in every aspect of healing strokes, Parkinson's, I mean, so many uses, as well as injuries, because what you need when you injure yourself is to increase blood flow to that area. I had a good friend with a burn on his hand after 3 dives. It was a 3rd-degree burn. Now, after a couple weeks, you can't, and this was only 3 dives, you can't even see where the blister was. I've seen neurological injuries, brachial plexus injuries, with no movement and complete atrophy of the muscles, getting movement back within 3 days. Hi, welcome back to The Naked Doctor. I'm Dr. Tammy.
And I'm Christy.
And we have a great show, heavy show.
A heavy show, but a good show. Yeah. Very informative, I would say, for sure.
Yes. And when we talk about the naked truth, but behind health, wellness, wealth, we do that sometimes
health
too.
And wealth, true.
And lifestyle, I think it's very important that relationship is up there very, very high. Mm-hmm. And if you have toxic relationships, it can really affect your physical health. I really saw that with me. I was in a severely abusive, pathological relationship for over 6 years. And I look back at pictures of me back then, I aged so fast. And I started to have really, changes in my hormones, because I always say that you have a thought becomes a thing. And that thing can be a complete physical collapse, even to, I call it slow suicide. Some people will even develop life-threatening illnesses, cancer and everything else, because they just want out and they don't know how to get out. And so I'm not saying that all physiological disease is because of emotional abuse.
Autoimmune, which is a problem over a problem over a problem, can often be unaddressed problems in your own life that you just haven't. If you're telling your body constantly that you are in danger 24/7 with your entire thought process and all of your hormones, that can't be a sustainable, fight or flight is not a sustainable place to live.
It is not.
Is it?
No.
It really isn't. Like, that's like having the gas all the way down on the car, but also the brake, and expecting your engine to last. There's no way.
We talk about your health too, all those cortisol, all those, adrenaline hormones and all that. Some people put on a tremendous amount of weight, and then you have those health problems. I happen to be a stress starver, so, I kind of go the other way. Yeah. And that has a whole bunch of health problems concerned with that too. Yeah. And so this isn't a benign thing, it is a heavy thing. And, I also find that there are some relationships where you just don't have good boundaries. And so if you have a partner that you can work on that, it doesn't mean that every time you see these red flags or any of these definitions you can relate to, it doesn't mean that that's a relationship you have to throw away. It just might mean that there are some discussions and boundaries and things that
there are tendencies. There's a spectrum. There are things that we might notice that we don't like about someone. That doesn't mean they're full on. We can all find things in our partner that we would like to see improvement on, often that means we have to look here, right? And then we talked about this too, being kind to yourself when that has happened.
Yes.
Not being so hard on yourself when you feel like you've had or been taken advantage of. That doesn't mean that you were weak. That just means that someone was able to find your specific weaknesses and use them against you. And again, in the end, it makes us stronger, and we move forward with a wounded heart, but a stronger heart. And what you were talking about, I never really thought about the impact that physically a broken heart can have on you in the rest of your life, how you look, how you express yourself, how well you want to take care of yourself. If you're angry at yourself over a relationship, are you really practicing good self-care when you come out of that?
There's actually research that shows that you can die of a broken heart, because what will happen, especially in the elderly, when there's been a connection for 50 years, and a mate dies, there are actually hormones called BMP that are released from the heart that can cause heart failure. So from the
you can really
hormones,
die of a broken heart.
Really, look it up. Don't, you can
yeah.
Google. I mean, it's a real thing. So the stress that can cause, being in toxic soup all the time, can be a real issue.
And those hormones can get addictive even if they're negative, right? So that you think that that's your new normal.
Yeah.
And if you did have a history of that kind of behavior, if you weren't in the healthiest household where there was a relationship there that may have been toxic, and you grew up in that toxic soup, but it felt normal,
Yes.
that was your baseline,
Yes.
then even though it doesn't feel great to you, you think this is how a relationship goes. And noticing that that's not normal. You don't have to live in that. Just because your parents were that way doesn't mean that you have to live that way as well.
I think one of the things too, that if you are experiencing that, besides beating yourself up, I think you should own the amazingness of you. Because what I find is that the people who are most victim, because people would say, well, you're successful, you're a doctor, you're nice, you're all these things. And how did that happen to you? It happened because of those things.
Yes.
Because I had the supply that they needed.
You had enough light for you and me both. That's the way it was. And if someone is wounded, because we really do come back to the unhealed in you was manipulating the unhealed in me, then we have another person that's coming to it, completely, as they were almost running a program, right? So how do you honestly fault yourself? You were someone who was being over and above and producing more light than you even need. And when someone in need got close and decided all that light's for me, that's not your fault. That's not an excuse for you to dim that light. Let me put it that way. Just because someone was able to overuse it because they couldn't produce their own doesn't mean that you have to stop being so bright.
Well, it doesn't make excuses, especially for pathological people that do these abusive things. But I really feel that there are everything's multifactorial.
Yeah, it's never black and white when we break it apart.
But there are components that are getting needs met, especially children who were abused or, had rough upbringings and were shamed a lot. And one of the things I've experienced with my son being 18 now is that I really tried to be mindful of, we joke around, I don't want to raise a jerk, but I don't want to raise a narcissist either. And what I found, especially being a single mom, you have parental guilt and I work a lot, is that he would ask me for something and I would say no. And then he would ask me again and I would say no. He'd ask me again and I'd be a mad no. And he would ask again and it was a yes, because I was just so frustrated or so tired. And so I was literally teaching him how to treat me.
Right. And he knew where your buttons were exactly and how far to push you to get what he wanted.
So these people are often not bad people, unless they're pathological, but they're people who have learned how to find your weak spots, get their needs met. And unfortunately, if they have a lot of internal shame and that's all the only way they've learned and conditioned themselves to get their needs met, and you've got a big supply and you have a lot to offer.
And you are someone that's willing to make small compromises because you love them. So you think it's a small compromise. Why? I'm giving into one thing, not a big deal. But pretty soon you find you've compromised yourself into a corner. And how do you... That's exactly what we're talking about. Do you realize that you have compromised yourself into a corner?
Yes. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it is a slippery slope.
They're saying it's time for a break. We're going to take a little break and we're going to continue the conversation and talk a little bit more about maybe how to protect yourself and what to do if you are in a situation that you find is a little tricky.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Naked Doctor. Today we are talking about narcissism, a very common conversation.
Such a cheery conversation.
So cheery, a little heavy, but really too, if we're going to talk about the naked truth behind health and lifestyle and all those things, we have to talk about your emotional relationship health, because at the end of the day,
important.
That's what we're here to do. We are connected. All of our cells are connected in relationship. We, without relationship, and that's another thing with being in these toxic relationships, is neglect. A cell cannot survive in a petri dish without another cell or a host or as a parasite kind of thing. I mean, you cannot exist in a vacuum. So, if you're finding yourself that you've become sort of this symbiosis with this person who is using up all of your energy, and that can be your physical resources, your financial resources can be the most devastating. And, if you are vulnerable at all, and you are, kind, or you have a hole, or you're searching, or feel like you're overwhelmed and you need someone to come save you, especially with the financial abuse, those are very precarious positions to be in, that someone can swoop in and say, oh, I'll save you. And then if we kind of talk about glossary of terms a little bit, the first thing that happens in a relationship is I was sort of recognizing, and the language is very important that you understand these things. So we'll do a whole show on a glossary of terms sometimes. But one of the worst things that comes up that gets you deep in the soup is the love bombing. So if it seems too good to be true in the beginning, and you are moving too fast and they are ready to swoop in, because, what we talked about was that the red flags, your intuition, we've
been taught to turn the volume down on it. And I think a big part of that is people no longer speak their truth. How are you today? I'm fine. Like, we know that half of what comes out of our mouth is ingenuine. So it's sort of thrown our intuition off a little bit. Well, half the time people aren't really telling me the truth. So I see this red flag, but it's something that I want so bad that I'm also willing to turn the volume down on that intuition. Being love bombed is awesome. Suddenly being the center of somebody's world, and yeah, it may seem like it's going a little fast, but it feels so good. And now you're making those little, this isn't the best for me, but this doesn't feel right, but you're willing to turn that volume down because you want something so bad, and because we've been trained not to listen to it anymore.
I think some of the other glossary of terms that comes up as well are things like the gaslighting. So you have this love bombing stage. Everything seems like it's so wonderful, and you're so hungry for this person to come in and rescue you, and you're so wanting, maybe you're busy, and because you have all these, financial resources or physical resources to offer, it's just like you think someone can come in and relieve some of the stress, and they're more than happy to do that. And shame comes into that. I mean, it has been I've been out of that toxic relationship for like 5 years, and I'm just now really able to talk about it without a lot of triggers coming up. And it's hard because too, when you're in a good, healthy relationship, you don't want to talk about it because, number one, you don't want to feel those triggers, but also, like, whenever I've done Facebook Lives and, I was dating somebody or something, like, their kids would call them and go, like, are you that narcissist?
Yeah,
Are you that jerk? And it's like, no, I'm talking about this because I'm healing from something and I'm wanting to help people in the future. But, you kind of dig yourself in a hole, and then before you know, they've gaslighted you. They make you feel like you're crazy. They've triangulated you, so they've turned other people against you, and they've told them that you're crazy or you're hormonal or you've got some mental problems. And then they'll isolate you. So now the friends that you're around, you don't have those anymore. So you don't have anybody. The few friends that you do have, they get very burned out because they're like, would you please do poop or get off the pot?
Yeah,
it's
do
like,
something about this.
Would you do something? But you don't feel like you can. And so now you stop even engaging with them because they're sick of it.
Yes.
And so now you
Yes.
find yourself very alone, which is very vulnerable.
And no longer feeling like there's anyone for you to trust, not even yourself.
Not even yourself.
Yes, and that's it.
That's
That
the
is
hardest.
what we call rock bottom, or some people like to call the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
And it takes a lot of introspection and a lot of strength. And we've all known people that have dwelt within that dark place for quite some time, not realizing that it can be viewed as a fog that has rolled in, but that will roll back out. It is inevitable for those things to pass and for healing to occur. But should you choose to stay there forever and be bitter and never open your heart back up again and never trust your intuition again, you can choose that. When we talk about creating your own reality, it really is that kind of choice. So we're talking about also, all right, we're listening to our intuition again. If you've had something that you've already come through and you're looking for love again, how to learn how to recognize those things, but not become so fearful that now you have a chip on your shoulder, because who's the narcissist now if you're coming in going, from now on it's all me and I don't need you and you're just gonna, right, I'm gonna put you in your place.
You just moved down the spectrum.
Right, you've just moved down the spectrum. We don't want that either. We don't want negative behavior to create more negative behavior. We're going the opposite way with this one.
I think healing in that too can be very protective as well, because now when I get into a relationship, I try not to take that with me. It's hard sometimes, but I am very slow because I'll wait it out. It's like you want to make sure that this wasn't love bombing, that this is genuine, and people can hold it together for a long time before you see the true nature of the gaslighting coming out and the isolation and all those things that they do. And for me, just to be extremely vulnerable, the rock bottom for me was I was completely devastated. And I don't like to say suicidal, but there's a point at which you just don't have anything left. You are completely depleted. And I remember sitting on my back porch, and I had family over, and they were partying, and they had the fire going and roasting marshmallows, and they were so trying to get me out of my bed that the porch was the furthest I could get from out of my bed. And I was scrolling on Facebook, and I saw a video, and it was a guy talking about what he said. I heard it. It was like the download. It was the message I needed.
That you needed to hear.
It was a turning point. And this guy was already gone. He'd been gone for like a month, but still kind of hoovering, they call it hoovering, would come back, he'd go to all his other supplies he had going, and then he'd hoover back and try to, squeeze out some more supply. And one of the things that happens too is that you feel like you want to defend yourself, and that keeps you in the game. And I'll tell you, the only way to win is not to play.
Is no playing whatsoever,
no play.
No
You
response.
Just cut it off, unless you have to because it's a spouse with children or something like that, then you still don't play the game.
Yeah.
But if you can go no contact, that's the best. But what I realized when I'm watching this video is they said, if you are completely devastated after a breakup, because relationships break up, and they're never pretty,
never
and they're
fun.
hard. But if you are so devastated that you don't even know how to get out of bed, or you don't know what tomorrow looks like, and you have lots to live for, but you feel that way, that you are in a narcissistic relationship. And until that moment, I never heard that word. And he went through sort of a glossary of terms about the love bombing and the gaslighting, and I would just,
oh, that's me.
How did
like
I
when you're
miss
playing
this?
those games, put a finger down if, and you're thinking,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, that's all me.
That's all
But
me.
did it not, it's not that it now gave you an excuse
no,
or
it just woke me up.
it was more than labels. It was like a realization that all of these symptoms have a
Yes.
name and
Yes.
can be treated.
Yes.
Ooh, yes.
And my healing began in that
Right
moment.
then. Right then.
And I did not let him come around anymore. I did not let him call anymore. And it was over in my mind.
I'm taking the game away.
I'm
you don't
taking
have
the game away
anymore.
And it was just very healing. So I hope for you that if you are in that place, that you're hearing this message that I heard that day, and this is exactly for you. So you could start your healing. And if it's not fixable, get the heck away.
Right.
So it's time for a little break. We're going to come back. We're going to wrap this up in a pretty little bow, and a few things that you can do if you are finding yourself in that situation, that you can have a plan, because it's all about having a plan always. So we'll be right back. So we've had a great show today. We've been talking about toxic relationships, your role, how to get out if you need to. Again, this could be emergency. Have a plan. Don't just jump to this, but find a way to get some help. You can reach out to the National Domestic Abuse Hotline, and we've got that number there for you. But really, the takeaway that we want for you is that you're not broken. You don't need fixed. There is life on the other side. I have a beautiful relationship now. I'm very happy. Things are wonderful. And you just have to let that go, and you can't have the new until you let the old go.
Right. Learning to trust your own heart. Again, if you really want to find a trustworthy heart, trust in your own heart. And that doesn't mean getting on the roller coaster over and over again, right? That quick ride is one of those red flags. Give it some time. Do you really know someone until you've seen them in multiple stages of life?
No, you don't.
Through multiple seasons, good and bad. That's when you know what a person's like, not because it's been fun for 30 days.
Yeah, and that love bombing stage is very, very scary. All right. Kind of the final message is don't beat yourself up. There's something called the goodbye dance. It may take you, just like quitting any other habit, it may take you several times. So don't beat yourself up if you're struggling to find your boundaries, and have a plan. That's the biggest thing. You know, financially, if you need that support, if you need that, have a plan. All right, we've had a great show this week. Hope you've learned something. And if you're hurting, there is healing on the other side.
Absolutely.
Find us on thenakeddoctorshow.com. We're on social media. Reach out. Give us topics if you have them that you'd like us to talk about. And please visit us again. We love you very much. Have a blessed week, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.